"Come on, officer, just one spar, for fun." The prisoner smirked from behind the bars. The female police officer tightened her grip on her baton. It sounded insane. Why would she ever agree? But the moment she stepped forward, the room fell silent. And what happened next shocked the entire prison. Stay with me until the end, because this story will leave you stunned. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's begin. Officer Rachel Martinez had been working at Riverside Correctional Facility for exactly 18 months. At 26 years old, she stood 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighed 120 pounds. To most people looking at her, she appeared like any other young woman trying to make her way in a demanding profession. What they didn't see was the fire that burned behind her calm exterior, or the countless hours she had spent preparing for moments exactly like this one. The morning of March 15th started like any other Tuesday at the facility. Rachel arrived at 7:30 sharp, her uniform pressed and her equipment properly secured. She had developed a routine over the past year and a half that helped her navigate the challenges of working in a male-dominated environment, surrounded by individuals who tested boundaries every single day. "Shantitu, Martinez, you're on Block C today," Sergeant Thompson announced during the morning briefing. Block C was known for housing some of the facility's more challenging inmates. It wasn't the maximum security wing, but it held men who had earned reputations for pushing limits and testing new officers. As Rachel made her rounds that morning, she noticed the usual stares and comments. Some inmates would whistle under their breath, others would make remarks about her appearance or question her authority. She had learned to ignore most of it, understanding that respect in this environment had to be earned through consistency and professionalism. But Marcus "Thunder" Rodriguez was different from the other inmates. At 32 years old, he had been serving a 5-year sentence for aggravated assault. What made him stand out wasn't just his imposing 6'2" frame or his reputation as a former amateur boxer. It was the way he carried himself with a confidence that seemed to fill whatever space he occupied. Thunder had been watching Officer Martinez since her first week on the job. Unlike other inmates who would make crude comments or inappropriate gestures, he observed quietly. He noticed how she handled confrontations with other prisoners, how she never backed down when challenged, and how she maintained her composure even when situations became heated. "You know what I think about you, Officer Martinez," Thunder called out as Rachel passed his cell during her afternoon rounds. His voice was calm, almost conversational, which immediately caught her attention. Most inmates who wanted to provoke her would raise their voices or use aggressive language. Rachel stopped walking but didn't turn toward his cell. "I'm sure you're going to tell me regardless of whether I want to hear it or not." Thunder chuckled softly. "I think you're tougher than you look. I've been watching you handle situations in here, and you've got something most of these other officers don't have." "And what's that supposed to be?" Rachel asked, finally turning to face him while maintaining a professional distance from the bars. "Heart," Thunder replied simply. "Real fighters recognize other real fighters. You've got the spirit of someone who doesn't back down from a challenge." Rachel felt an unexpected shift in the conversation. This wasn't the typical harassment or intimidation she had grown accustomed to. There was something different in Thunder's tone, something that sounded almost like respect. "I appreciate the observation," Rachel said carefully, "but I'm here to do my job, not to impress anyone." Thunder nodded slowly. "I respect that. But let me ask you something, Officer Martinez. Have you ever wondered what you're really capable of when everything is on the line?" The question caught Rachel off guard. She had been asked many things by inmates over the past 18 months, but never something that seemed so genuinely thoughtful. "What do you mean by that?" she found herself asking, despite knowing she should probably just continue her rounds. "I mean, you walk through here every day dealing with men who are bigger than you, stronger than you, and some of them would love nothing more than to see you fail. But you never flinch. That takes real courage. But courage and ability aren't always the same thing." Rachel felt her jaw tighten slightly. Are you questioning my ability to do my job? Thunder raised his hands in a gesture of peace. Not at all. I'm just curious about something. You carry yourself like someone who knows how to handle themselves physically. Am I wrong about that? The conversation was taking a turn that Rachel hadn't expected. She looked around the block to make sure no other inmates were within earshot, then stepped slightly closer to Thunder's cell. "Why are you asking me this?" she said quietly. Thunder leaned against the bars, his expression becoming more serious. "Because I've been in this place for 3 years now, and I've seen dozens of officers come and go. Some of them were tough guys who thought their badge and their baton made them invincible. Others were scared from day one and never should have taken the job. But you're different. Different how? You've got the look of someone who's been trained, really trained. Not just the basic academy stuff that every officer gets, but something deeper, something more serious." Rachel felt her heart rate increase slightly. Thunder was more perceptive than she had given him credit for. The truth was that she had indeed been trained in ways that went far beyond standard police academy requirements, but that wasn't information she shared with anyone at work. "You're reading too much into things," she said, but her voice lacked the conviction she intended. Thunder smiled knowingly. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm right, and you're trying to keep a low profile because you know that once people find out what you're really capable of, everything changes." The accuracy of his observation sent a chill down Rachel's spine. She had spent the last 18 months deliberately downplaying her abilities, choosing to rely on de-escalation and protocol rather than physical confrontation whenever possible. "Let me tell you something about myself, Officer Martinez," Thunder continued. "Before I ended up in here, I spent 12 years training in mixed martial arts. I fought professionally for 8 of those years. I know what real skill looks like, and I know what it feels like to be around someone who's dangerous in ways that most people can't even comprehend." Rachel remained silent, but Thunder could see that his words were having an impact. "The reason I'm telling you this is because I have a proposition for you, something that could satisfy both of our curiosities about what the other one is really made of." "What kind of proposition?" Rachel asked, though part of her already suspected where this conversation was heading. Thunder's expression became more intense. "A friendly sparring session. No weapons, no backup, no rules except that we both walk away when it's over. Just 2 people testing their skills against each other to see who's been hiding what." Rachel felt her breath catch in her throat. The suggestion was absolutely insane on multiple levels. It violated every policy and regulation she could think of, and the potential consequences if they were caught would be career-ending at minimum. But there was something about Thunder's challenge that spoke to a part of her that she had been suppressing for months. "You're completely out of your mind," Rachel said finally, but her voice carried less conviction than she intended. The rational part of her brain was screaming that this was the worst idea she had ever heard. But another part, a part she had been carefully keeping buried, was already calculating distances and analyzing Thunder's stance. Thunder noticed the shift immediately. "Am I, though? Look around, Officer Martinez. We're in the middle of the afternoon shift change. Block C is going to be practically empty for the next 20 minutes while the evening crew gets briefed. The cameras in the common area have been malfunctioning for 3 days now, and maintenance keeps saying they'll fix them tomorrow." Rachel's eyes narrowed. "How do you know about the camera situation?" "Because I pay attention. Same way I noticed that you always check the security monitor at the nurse's station when you think nobody's looking. Same way I noticed that you unconsciously shift your weight to your left foot when you're preparing for trouble. Same way I noticed the calluses on your knuckles that don't come from academy training." Every observation Thunder made was accurate, and Rachel found herself both impressed and disturbed by his attention to detail. She had been so careful to blend in, to appear ordinary, but apparently she hadn't been as successful as she thought. Even if what you're saying is true about the cameras and the timing," Rachel said slowly, "this is still the most reckless thing anyone has ever suggested to me. If we get caught, my career is over. If someone gets hurt, we're both looking at serious charges. Thunder nodded seriously. You're absolutely right. This is dangerous on every level you can imagine. But let me ask you something, Officer Martinez. When was the last time you felt truly alive? When was the last time you got to use the skills you've spent years developing? The question hit Rachel harder than she expected. The truth was that she hadn't felt truly challenged or engaged in months. Every day at the facility followed the same routine, the same protocols, the same careful dance of maintaining authority while avoiding confrontation. "What makes you think I have any skills worth testing?" she asked. Though the question came out more curious than defensive, Thunder's smile returned, but this time it carried a respect that hadn't been there before. "Because 3 weeks ago, when inmate Johnson tried to grab you during his medical escort, you didn't just push him away or call for backup. For exactly 2 seconds before you caught yourself, you moved like someone who knows exactly how to break a man's arm in 3 different places." Rachel felt her face flush. The incident with Johnson had happened so quickly that she thought no one had noticed her momentary lapse in composure. But Thunder had been watching, analyzing, understanding what he was seeing. "Johnson outweighs me by 80 pounds, Rachel said quietly. "Basic defensive training teaches you to use leverage and momentum. Basic training teaches you to create distance and call for help," Thunder corrected. "What you did was position yourself for a counterattack that would have ended the situation permanently. There's a big difference." The accuracy of his assessment was unsettling. Rachel realized that Thunder wasn't just observant. He was tactically minded in a way that suggested serious training and experience. "Tell me about your background," she said, changing the subject slightly. "You mentioned professional fighting. What kind of training are we talking about?" Thunder's expression became more serious. "Started with boxing when I was 12. My father thought it would keep me out of trouble in our neighborhood. Turned out I had natural ability and serious power. Made it to the Golden Gloves finals twice as an amateur. Then I discovered mixed martial arts and realized I had been thinking too small." "How small to how big?" Rachel asked, finding herself genuinely interested despite the dangerous territory this conversation was entering. "One small enough that I thought fighting was just about throwing punches. Big enough that I learned it's actually about understanding violence as a language and becoming fluent in every dialect. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai, wrestling, even some weapons training. I spent 8 years fighting professionally in regional circuits. Never made it to the big leagues, but I was good enough to make a living and dangerous enough that people respected the threat I represented." Rachel absorbed this information while evaluating Thunder in a new light. She had dealt with plenty of inmates who claimed to be tough, but most of them were just street fighters with more attitude than skill. Thunder spoke about combat with the precision and respect of someone who understood it as both art and science. "What ended your fighting career?" she asked. Thunder's expression darkened slightly. "The same thing that landed me in here. I let my emotions override my training, and someone got hurt worse than they should have. Sometimes the difference between a professional fighter and a dangerous criminal is just one bad decision." The honesty in his answer surprised Rachel. Most inmates she dealt with either denied their crimes entirely or bragged about them as badges of honor. Thunder seemed to carry his mistake as a genuine burden. "So when you're suggesting this sparring session," Rachel said carefully, "you're talking about testing yourself against someone you believe has comparable training and experience." "Exactly. Look, Officer Martinez, I'm not trying to hurt you or embarrass you or prove some point about male versus female strength. What I'm suggesting is a meeting between 2 professionals who understand what they're doing. A chance for both of us to remember who we really are underneath these uniforms and circumstances." Rachel felt something stirring inside her that she had been trying to suppress for months. It was the same feeling she used to get before competition, a mixture of anticipation and focus that made everything else fade into background noise. "Hypothetically," she said slowly, "if someone were crazy enough to consider this, what would the parameters be?" Thunder's eyes lit up with interest. "Simple ground rules. No strikes to the head or throat. No techniques designed to cause permanent injury. We go until someone taps out, gets pinned for 10 seconds, or decides they've had enough. Pure technical skill and conditioning, nothing more. And if someone gets injured anyway? Then we both agree it was a training accident that happened during routine cell inspection. I slipped and fell. You tried to help me up. We both got a little banged up in the process. Happens all the time in facilities like this. Rachel found herself actually considering the logistics, which terrified and excited her in equal measure. The rational part of her mind was still screaming warnings, but another part was already analyzing Thunder's stance, his reach, his likely strengths and weaknesses. "This is absolutely insane," she muttered, more to herself than to Thunder. Completely," Thunder agreed. "But sometimes the most insane decisions lead to the most important discoveries about who we really are." Rachel looked down the empty corridor, then back at Thunder. Her hand unconsciously moved to her radio, then stopped. For 18 months, she had been playing it safe, following protocol, being the perfect officer. But perfection was starting to feel like prison. "If we were going to do something this stupid," she said quietly, "when would it happen?" Thunder's smile was answer enough. "Tomorrow during the 3 o'clock shift change," Thunder said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Block C common area. 20 minutes, maybe 25 if we're lucky." Rachel felt her pulse quicken. This was really happening. After 18 months of careful restraint, she was about to cross a line she never thought she would approach. I need time to think about this," she said, though they both knew she had already made her decision. The hesitation in her voice wasn't doubt about whether she would do it. It was anticipation mixed with the kind of nervous energy that comes before any serious test. "Of course," Thunder replied. "But Officer Martinez, once we step onto that mat, so to speak, we're both committed. No backing out halfway through. No calling for help if things get intense. This stays between us, no matter what happens." Rachel nodded slowly. "Understood. But Thunder, I need you to understand something too. If you're expecting me to hold back because I'm smaller or because I'm a woman, you're going to be disappointed. I don't know how to fight at half speed." Thunder's respect for her seemed to deepen. "I wouldn't want it any other way. The whole point of this is to see what we're both really capable of when the gloves come off." As Rachel walked away from Thunder's cell, her mind was racing. 24 hours to prepare mentally for something that could change everything. She had been hiding her true abilities for so long that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to anticipate a real challenge. That evening, Rachel went through her usual routine at home, but everything felt different. As she prepared dinner, she found herself unconsciously running through combinations and defensive sequences. While watching television, her eyes kept drifting to the clock, calculating exactly how much time remained until the moment of truth. Sleep came fitfully that night. Rachel's dreams were filled with fragments of her past training, memories of sparring sessions that had pushed her to her absolute limits. She woke several times, her heart pounding as if she had already been fighting. The next morning arrived with an unusual energy in the air. Rachel arrived at work 30 minutes early, something she had never done before. She wanted time to walk through Block C, to visualize the space where everything would unfold. As she made her rounds, Rachel noticed that Thunder seemed different too. He wasn't making his usual observations or casual conversation. Instead, he appeared focused inward, like an athlete preparing for competition. When their eyes met briefly as she passed his cell, there was an understanding between them that needed no words. The morning dragged by with excruciating slowness. Every minute felt like an hour as Rachel went through the motions of her regular duties. She found herself checking the time constantly, calculating and recalculating how much longer she had to wait. At 2:30, Rachel positioned herself near the Block C common area. The space was exactly as Thunder had described, temporarily empty due to shift change, with malfunctioning cameras that hadn't been repaired despite multiple work orders. It was as if the universe had aligned to make this impossible situation possible. At exactly 3 o'clock, Thunder appeared in the common area. He had somehow managed to time his movement perfectly with the shift change, slipping out of his cell area during the brief window when guards were transitioning positions. "You came," he said simply. "I gave you my word," Rachel replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. They stood facing each other in the center of the empty room. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows that made the moment feel both surreal and intensely real. "Last chance to walk away," Thunder offered, though his stance suggested he was already committed to whatever came next. Rachel removed her utility belt slowly, placing her radio, baton, and other equipment on a nearby table. The action felt symbolic, like shedding not just her tools, but the identity she had maintained for 18 months. "No walking away," she said firmly. "But remember what you promised. This stays between us, regardless of how it ends." Thunder nodded and began stretching, his movements fluid and practiced. Rachel did the same, feeling muscle memory kick in as her body prepared for combat. It had been almost 2 years since she had been in a real physical confrontation, but her conditioning hadn't abandoned her. "Standard grappling rules," Thunder said as they began to circle each other. "No strikes above the shoulders. Submission or pin ends the match." "Agreed?" "Agreed," Rachel replied, though she was already analyzing his footwork and balance. Thunder moved like someone with serious training, but she noticed subtle tells that suggested his background was primarily in striking arts rather than grappling. They touched gloves briefly, a gesture of respect that felt strangely formal in their surroundings, and then the match began. Thunder moved first, attempting a takedown that relied more on strength than technique. Rachel sprawled expertly, using his momentum against him to reverse their positions. Within seconds, she had him in a front headlock, controlling his posture and movement. "Interesting," Thunder muttered, working to improve his position. He had expected Officer Martinez to be skilled, but her reaction time and technical precision were beyond what he had anticipated. Rachel maintained control for nearly 30 seconds before Thunder managed to slip out and reset to standing. His eyes showed a new level of respect mixed with surprise. Whatever he had expected from their encounter, she was already exceeding it. "My turn," Rachel said quietly, and this time she initiated the engagement. Her takedown was a thing of beauty, a perfect double leg that demonstrated years of serious training. Thunder found himself on his back before he fully understood how he had gotten there. Rachel immediately moved to establish side control, her positioning textbook perfect. "Where did you learn to move like that?" Thunder asked as he worked to escape her control. He was strong enough to muscle out of most positions, but Rachel's technique was making his strength advantage largely irrelevant. "Same place you learned to throw punches," Rachel replied, adjusting her position to maintain dominance. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Thunder bridged explosively, using his size advantage to create space. For a moment, it looked like he might reverse their positions, but Rachel flowed with his movement like water, ending up in an even more dominant position than before. "This isn't going how I expected," Thunder admitted, breathing harder now. The physical exertion was significant, but more importantly, he was discovering that his assumptions about their relative skill levels had been completely wrong. "What exactly were you expecting?" Rachel asked, maintaining her control while staying alert for any reversal attempts. "Honestly, I thought I would be teaching you a lesson about the difference between academy training and real fighting experience. I figured you were probably tough and well-trained by normal standards, but that ultimately size and experience would win out." Rachel shifted her weight, applying pressure that made Thunder's breathing more difficult. "And now I'm realizing that you've been hiding something much more significant than I suspected. This isn't just good training, Officer Martinez. This is elite-level skill. Where did you really come from before you started working here?" Rachel felt a moment of hesitation. The question touched on parts of her background that she had never discussed with anyone at the facility. But something about their current situation, The vulnerability and honesty of physical combat made her want to give Thunder a real answer. "Malkertia, I spent 4 years in the military," she said quietly, still maintaining her dominant position. "Special operations training. After that, 2 years competing in mixed martial arts before I decided I wanted a more stable career." Thunder stopped struggling for a moment, absorbing this information. Special operations. That explains the movement quality and the tactical awareness. What made you give up competing? Same thing that landed you in here, probably. One mistake that made me realize I needed to step away before someone got hurt worse than they should have. Thunder nodded, understanding passing between them. "So we're both running from versions of ourselves that we decided were too dangerous for the real world." Something like that, Rachel agreed. "But right now, I'm remembering why I was good at it in the first place." She transitioned smoothly to mount position, demonstrating the kind of fluid movement that only comes from thousands of hours of practice. Thunder found himself completely controlled by someone half his size, and the experience was both humbling and oddly exhilarating. "I have to ask," Thunder said, his voice strained from the pressure Rachel was applying. "If you're this skilled, why are you working as a corrections officer? You could be doing security consultation, private training, any number of things that would pay better and utilize your abilities." Rachel paused, considering how much truth she was willing to share. "Because I wanted to disappear. I wanted a job where I could help people in small ways without anyone expecting me to be special or dangerous. I thought I could just blend in and live a quiet life." "How's that working out for you?" Thunder asked with a slight smile, despite his disadvantaged position. "Until about 5 minutes ago, pretty well," Rachel admitted. "But I'm starting to remember that some parts of who you are don't stay buried forever." Thunder made another escape attempt, this one more technical and better timed. He managed to get to his knees, but Rachel immediately took his back, her arms sliding around his torso in a rear naked choke setup. "Time to tap," Rachel said softly, her forearm positioned against Thunder's throat. She wasn't applying pressure yet, but they both knew she could end the match in seconds if she chose to. Thunder felt the reality of his situation sink in completely. Officer Martinez, Rachel, hadn't just defeated him. She had dominated him so thoroughly that he never had a real chance to implement his own game plan. It was a humbling experience, but also oddly liberating. "Jai, I tap," Thunder said clearly, and Rachel immediately released the hold and moved away from him. They sat on the floor for a moment, both breathing hard from the exertion. The silence between them was comfortable, the kind that exists between people who have shared an intense experience and come out the other side with mutual respect. "That was not at all what I expected," Thunder said finally, shaking his head with a mixture of amazement and embarrassment. "What did you think would happen?" Rachel asked, genuinely curious about his perspective. "I thought I would give you a good technical lesson, while being respectful about the physical differences between us. Maybe teach you some things about leverage and timing that would help you in future situations. Instead, you just gave me a masterclass in why assumptions are dangerous." Rachel smiled, the first completely genuine smile Thunder had seen from her in 18 months of observation. "For what it's worth, you're better than most people I've trained with. Your boxing background shows in your movement and your instincts are solid. You just ran into someone with more specific experience in this particular type of combat." "More specific experience," Thunder repeated, laughing softly. "That's one way to put it. Rachel, what you just did to me, that wasn't just good technique. That was artistry. You moved like someone who's been in situations where losing meant something more serious than embarrassment." The observation was more accurate than Rachel cared to admit. Her military training had included scenarios where combat skills were tested under real pressure, with real consequences for failure. That experience had created a level of composure and technical precision that couldn't be replicated in civilian training environments. "We should probably get back," Rachel said, standing up and beginning to collect her equipment. "The shift change won't last much longer." Thunder nodded, but neither of them moved immediately. Something had changed between them during their brief encounter, and both of them were reluctant to return to the artificial boundaries of their official roles. "Yeah, Rachel," Thunder said as she was fastening her utility belt. "Thank you for this. I know it was risky for you, and I know you didn't have to prove anything to me, but getting to see who you really are, it's been an honor." Rachel felt unexpectedly moved by his words. For 18 months, she had been playing a role, being the version of herself that seemed safest and most appropriate. Having someone recognize and respect her authentic capabilities felt like coming up for air after holding her breath underwater. "Thank you for pushing me to remember who I used to be," she replied. "I didn't realize how much I missed feeling genuinely challenged until just now." As they prepared to return to their respective roles, prisoner and guard, both Rachel and Thunder knew that their relationship had fundamentally changed. The artificial hierarchy that had defined their interactions was still there, but underneath it was something new. Genuine mutual respect between two warriors who had tested each other and found themselves evenly matched in ways that transcended their current circumstances. "This stays between us," Rachel said one final time. "Absolutely," Thunder agreed. "But Officer Martinez, Rachel, don't let this be the last time you remember who you really are. The world needs people like you to stop hiding." As Rachel walked away from the common area, she felt something she hadn't experienced in almost 2 years. The satisfaction that comes from being fully engaged, fully present, fully herself. The encounter with Thunder had awakened something that she had thought was safely buried, and she wasn't entirely sure whether that was a good thing or a dangerous development. What she did know was that tomorrow would feel different from every day of the past 18 months. The question was whether she would choose to embrace that difference or work even harder to suppress it. 3 weeks later, word had spread throughout Riverside Correctional Facility in whispers and fragments. Nobody knew exactly what had happened in Block C that afternoon, but everyone could sense that something fundamental had shifted. Thunder Rodriguez carried himself differently now, with a quiet respect that other inmates noticed immediately. Officer Martinez continued her rounds with the same professionalism as always, but there was something new in her eyes, a confidence that seemed to radiate from within. The truth of their encounter remained locked between them, a secret that had transformed both of their lives in ways neither had expected. Rachel had rediscovered parts of herself that she thought were buried forever, while Thunder had learned that true strength isn't about dominating others, but recognizing and respecting the power that exists in unexpected places. Sometimes the most profound lessons come from moments that challenge everything we think we know about ourselves and others. Rachel Martinez had spent 18 months hiding who she really was, afraid that her true capabilities would create problems in her new life. Thunder Rodriguez had made assumptions based on appearances, never imagining that the quiet officer walking past his cell possessed skills that would humble him completely. Their story reminds us that we should never judge someone's abilities by their profession, their size, or their circumstances. Behind every uniform, every job title, every ordinary-looking person, there might be extraordinary stories waiting to be discovered. The janitor might be a former champion, the librarian might be a retired special forces operator, and the corrections officer might be someone who could change your entire perspective on what strength really means.